Hey, we are in Haftarah Emor, and that is Ezekiel 44, verse 15 through 31. Hey, did you know that Ezekiel grew up as the son of a priest? And so his whole life's expectation would have been that when he turns 30, he would assume the duties of a priest. I didn't I don't think I knew that before until I was digging into this particular Haftarah, even though, we've talked about um, Ezekiel before. But if you look at Ezekiel chapter 1, you get a little bit of background. So he was 30 when he had his first prophetic vision and calling as a prophet from God. And it says that this was in the 5th year of the king's captivity. Well, we also know that Ezekiel went into captivity at the same time as the king. So that would mean that when he went into captivity, he was 25 years old. Okay. So I guess, again, this was highlighted to me maybe because this Haftarah talks so much about priests. But I got to wondering about Ezekiel. Like, what was he thinking during those years of his captivity? He's away from the temple, not going to be able to perform the duties that he has been raised to perform his whole life. And I wonder how he was feeling the closer he got to age 30. Because 30 is when the priest could assume their duties. And again, think about it. He who would have prepared to be a priest his whole life. So the years are ticking by. He's getting closer and closer to when he should be doing it, but he's still in captivity. And I thought it was really cool that he received his first calling and prophetic message from God when he was 30, that same age that he would have begun his priesthood. I think that's a really good example of the word bittersweet, because all his life he's expected one role and then he gets another, but it's God calling him to it, right? And think about this. Think about the role of the priest and the role of the prophet and how very, very different that they are, right? Because the priest works with sameness and routine, right? Every day they have a carefully laid out protocol that they're not supposed to deviate from at all. And the prophet, well, he's more of an innovator. He can use his charisma, his personality, and infuse that into how he delivers God's message. And God's message changes, right? So each of these two roles is very, very important, but they're distinct. And if you've spent your whole life getting ready for one and then you're called to the other, I mean, that would have been a really big adjustment. And even though the calling comes from God, it's still, for him as a person, it's a big adjustment. And so he would have probably agonized over it, probably questioned his ability. And I wonder if you could relate to that. Like, I wonder if you have some expectation of how your life would turn out and it took a detour or like completely different direction, different destination. Or I wonder if maybe you've got a certain age in your mind or a certain timeline of expectation, and it's at that point that you know that you should be doing that one thing that you've always thought that you would do. But what if that's not happening? What if it won't happen? So I wonder if it can help you, because I think we all go through this in one aspect or another of our lives, whether it's just our day-to-day lives or whether it's like in specific service to God, where we thought it was one way and then it gets, is it derailed? So I wonder if maybe it helps you to think that Ezekiel, this mighty prophet of God, that he had to wrestle with that too. And perhaps in his wrestling with it, that was what helped prepare him to be the kind of prophet, amazing prophet that he was? I don't know. So, shifting a little bit now, let's sort of dig in a little bit to the Haftarah. So the Haftarah this week talks about the priesthood and some of the special limitations and prohibitions that the priests have in order to maintain their sanctity to serve in the temple. And that's the tie-in with this week's Torah portion, because the Torah portion focused on priests as well. Now, something that I didn't really pay a lot of attention to until I was digging into this Haftarah is that Ezekiel speaks of the priests in the third temple. And so not only was that future for him, but it's also like in our future. And apparently these additional responsibilities served a really high purpose, because they gave priests a higher level of sanctity required for service in the temple. And I learned that scholars are quick to point out that Ezekiel's rendering of the priest's responsibility are different from what we read in the Torah, both in the Torah portion for Emor and also passages in Numbers. And I didn't realize that before, how different that they were, and I didn't know that there was such a big controversy as to why there were these differences. So that's a whole rabbit trail to go down. I didn't. I just don't know enough about this subject to be able to speak more on that, except to say that there seems to be an even higher level of sanctity that's being called for in regard to the priests in the third temple, which is why they have additional restrictions and activities on them. Because remember, what makes somebody sacred is that they act differently from the people around them. So, moving on deeper into the Haftarah, there's this verse in the Torah, in Leviticus 21:8, and it says, "You shall sanctify him, for he offers the bread of your God. He shall be holy to you, for I, the Lord, who sanctify you, am holy." Now, the sages notice something here. At the end of the verse, it says that it's God who makes the priest sacred. But in the same verse in the beginning, it says to the people, "You make the priest sacred." So the question that the sages asked is, in what way do the people of God make the priests sacred? And by that I mean holy, set apart specifically for God's use. And I was stuck with this for this lesson because I wonder if we are missing the mark on this somehow. You will sanctify the priests. And I wonder if we, especially those of us who were not raised in a Jewish home, I wonder if we don't make enough of a distinction between us and the Levitical priests. Now, in Judaism, I learned there's some specific ways that the Kohanim, that's Hebrew for priests, some specific ways that the priests are set apart. And I thought this was really interesting. So those of you who have attended either Jewish synagogues or Messianic synagogues, you probably then have experienced the reading of the Torah, right? So the Torah service. There's Torah readings that are done in front of the congregation, and usually there's a blessing on the reading of the Torah before the Torah is read. So often in Jewish synagogues, you'll find that a Kohen, a priest, is specially recognized by the congregation by them having the right and the privilege to come up, to be called up to say these blessings over the reading of the Torah. And then that Kohen will stand there during the whole time that the Torah is read. Some Jewish synagogues will have the Kohen give the priestly blessing. And of course, we know this. We hear this in all kinds of synagogues and maybe even some churches. The Lord bless you and keep you. He make his face shine upon you. So in Jewish communities where there's a Kohen, someone from the priestly line, they'll be the ones who say that. And then in some communities, the honor of grace after meals, that's given specifically to the priests. So I just want to throw this out there for you to consider, prayerfully consider. I wonder if we have overemphasized the idea that we're all a kingdom of priests. Now, I put that in quotes not to diminish it, but just to have it sort of stand out. And so I wonder if we've overemphasized we're a kingdom of priests, such that we no longer hold the Levitical priesthood with the kind of regard and honor that we should. Because in the third temple that we're still looking forward to, there will be Levitical priests that are set apart for a specific purpose in the temple above anyone else. So me thinking about that this week got me kind of curious about these modern day priests. Like, who are they? And how can we know who's a priest? Well, did a little digging in this too. And so there's this rich tradition in Judaism among Jews that they know if the men know if they're a priest. They know if they're from the priestly line. This has been passed down verbally through the generations or in writing through the generations. But here's the thing. Thanks to DNA studies, we can actually confirm these claims. There was, I think, either this was the first study or it was like a really, really important study in 1997. Okay. It was done on Jewish males all over the world that had claimed that they were of the priestly line. And these studies showed that 98% of people who claimed to be a priest, whether they were Ashkenazi or Sephardic, two very separate they're separate now communities, 98% of those people actually do share a particular, it's the Y chromosome, a particular Y chromosome marker. And so what this means is the tradition of identifying oneself as a priest is actually now confirmed genetically. And I think that's really, really cool. And when you think about it, we can confirm that now, like 3,000 years after the commandment to sanctify the priest was given. And the priests today within Judaism are still distinct among the people. And, part of this is because families have been proud of this lineage and they've not let that truth be forgotten. But also, the sanctity of those extra commandments that were given to the priests, that played a role in the priests today still being able to be distinct among the people, right? But also, I believe, the deference and the honor that has been given to that the Jewish people have given to the priests, those who say they're of the priestly line, that deference and honor, I think, has really helped also to keep the priest distinct. So, for one, I want to do my part to sanctify these priests. I don't want to confuse my role, you are a royal priest, with that of a Levitical priest. And I want to find ways to honor these priests because they're going to have a very big role to play in the latter days in this third temple. And it's all according to and sanctioned by this God that we all serve in our own way. And I hadn't really thought about this before, and I don't really know in practical terms because right now we don't we aren't part of a synagogue that would um, have priests that are identified. So I don't know how this will work out practically in my life. One way that I'm honoring, I hope that I'm honoring and sanctifying and setting apart these priests is by sharing this with you, um, getting you to think about this in terms that maybe you haven't thought about before. For those of you who are in settings where there are Levitical priests and you're already practicing some things to bring honor and sanctification to them, please let me know how that goes. Or if you've given this some more thought, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So I think it's an important and often underlooked at topic. So I'll see you next week in the next Haftarah.